Her billionaire husband paid his mistress's rent. She froze their joint account. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The first sign of betrayal was not lipstick on a collar or a message left open on a phone. It was a rent payment with another woman's name attached to the life Naomi Brooks had helped build. On the 38th floor of a glass tower overlooking Central Park, winter lights spilled across the marble floors of the Whitmore penthouse like something polished and forgiving, softening every sharp edge except the one growing quietly inside her chest. Naomi stood in the dressing room with Andrew's black cashmere coat folded over one arm, her fingers still resting on the receipt she had pulled from the inside pocket. $8,700. Monthly rent. Sabrina Vaughn. Paid from joint account. For a long moment, the apartment made no sound. The city moved below her in silver lines of traffic and distant horns, but inside those walls, everything seemed to hold its breath. She read the line again, slower this time, as though kindness might appear between the words if she looked carefully enough. It did not. Naomi Brooks was 34 years old, a woman with deep brown skin, steady eyes, and a kind of calm that people often mistook for weakness until life gave them reason to learn better. She had not been born into marble hallways or private elevators. She had grown up in Queens, in a two-bedroom apartment where her mother, Marcia, came home from 12-hour nursing shifts with swollen feet and still found the strength to ask her daughter about homework, dreams, and whether she had eaten enough. Naomi learned early that money was not just numbers. Money was safety. Money was medicine. Money was the difference between staying and surviving. That was why the receipt did not simply hurt her heart. It insulted her history. Across the room, her navy evening gown waited on a silk hanger, chosen for the Whitmore Foundation Gala that night. Andrew had once told her that shade made her look like peace, like the only honest thing in a room full of expensive lies. Back then, she had believed him. Back then, before Whitmore Holdings became a billion-dollar empire again, before business magazines called him a visionary, before strangers praised him for the strength Naomi had helped him borrow in private. She remembered the nights when he sat at their kitchen island with his tie undone and fear in his eyes, wondering if lawsuits and failed developments would bury everything his family name had handed him. She remembered reviewing contracts beside him until 2 a.m, circling dangerous clauses in red pen, calling accountants, calming employees, reminding him that panic was not a strategy. He had called her his anchor then. Somewhere along the way, he had started treating her like furniture. Naomi placed the receipt on the vanity with careful fingers. Then she opened the banking app on her phone. Her thumb did not tremble. The first payment had gone out 8 months earlier. Then another. Then another. Same amount. Same recipient. Same account where her consulting income, her savings, and the donations she protected for young women's financial education had moved alongside Andrew's wealth under the promise of partnership. 8 months of rent for Sabrina Vaughn, a name Naomi recognized from gallery openings, charity dinners, and the soft, performative laughter of women who knew how to admire powerful men without ever challenging them. The truth arrived without drama. It did not crash through the door. It sat beside Naomi in the quiet and waited for her to look directly at it. She locked the phone, lifted her eyes to the mirror, and studied the woman staring back at her. No tears had fallen. Not yet. Maybe they would come later, when the house was empty and dignity no longer needed to stand guard. But in that moment, beneath the winter light, Naomi felt something colder and cleaner than grief begin to rise. Andrew had not only betrayed their marriage. He had used their shared life to finance the betrayal. She picked up the receipt, folded it once, and slipped it into the small pocket of her gown. Then she reached for her phone again, not to call him, not to accuse him, not to beg for an explanation dressed up as another lie. She called the bank. Her voice, when she spoke, was low, polished, and perfectly steady. "This is Naomi Brooks Whitmore," she said. "I need to place an immediate hold on recurring transfers from my joint account." Outside, Manhattan glittered as if nothing sacred had just broken. Inside, Naomi stood straighter, the silence around her no longer fragile but armed. She did not know exactly how much of her life would be lost before morning, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. The account would freeze before she did. The bank representative asked Naomi 3 security questions, then a fourth, then placed her on a brief hold while soft piano music filled the dressing room with a kind of elegance that felt almost cruel. Naomi stood near the window, looking down at Fifth Avenue, where yellow cabs moved through the late afternoon traffic and pedestrians hurried beneath wool coats and winter scarves. Somewhere below, ordinary people were buying flowers, picking up groceries, calling home to say they were running late. Life continued with its usual mercy, even while hers rearranged itself in silence. When the representative returned, Naomi requested transaction records for the last 12 months and a temporary review hold on recurring transfers above $5,000. She knew the language to use. She knew the difference between panic and procedure. Years before she became Mrs. Andrew Whitmore, she had taught financial literacy workshops in church basements, community centers, and public libraries across Queens, helping women understand bank statements, credit scores, shared accounts, and the quiet danger of signing documents they had not read. She had once told a room full of young mothers that love should make a woman feel safe, not financially blind. Now the lesson had come back, wearing her own wedding ring. By the time the call ended, the gown on the hanger no longer looked like something chosen for a gala. It looked like armor. Naomi dressed slowly, fastening the hidden zipper, smoothing the dark blue fabric over her waist, clasping the pearl earrings her mother had given her on her wedding day. Marcia Brooks had bought them from a small jewelry store in Jamaica, Queens, after saving tips and overtime pay for nearly a year. They were not the most expensive thing Naomi owned, not even close, but they were the only jewels in the room that felt clean. As Naomi touched them, she remembered the morning of her wedding at the chapel in Newport, Rhode Island, when her mother had stood behind her and whispered, "Baby, do not let any beautiful room convince you to shrink." At the time, Naomi had smiled, thinking love would protect her from that kind of shrinking. Andrew had seemed different then. He had held her hand in front of his old money relatives without shame. He had told her that he loved the way she challenged him, the way she saw through performance, the way she could look at a balance sheet and a broken heart with equal honesty. Their marriage had once felt like proof that 2 people from different worlds could build a third one together. He came from summer homes, legacy boards, and rooms where people spoke softly because power did not need to raise its voice. She came from late rent notices, hospital corridors, and a mother who believed that dignity was not inherited, it was practiced. For a while, those differences made them stronger. When Andrew's company nearly collapsed after a failed waterfront development in Brooklyn, Naomi was the one who sat beside him at midnight with legal folders spread across the dining table. She helped him identify which lenders could be negotiated with, which properties could be sold, which promises needed to be kept even when profit disappeared. She calmed his employees when payroll was uncertain. She reminded him that reputation was built in hard times, not during ribbon cuttings. Later, when Whitmore Holdings recovered, the newspapers photographed Andrew alone. They called him resilient, strategic, self-made. Naomi never corrected them. Love, she believed then, did not always need public credit. But love did need private respect. That was the part Andrew had forgotten. At 6:45 that evening, his text appeared on her phone. "Car will be downstairs in 15. Big night. Need you beside me." Naomi looked at the message until the screen dimmed. Need. Not love. Not thank you. Not are you ready. Need. The words settled over everything with perfect honesty. She picked up her clutch, slipped the folded receipt beside her lipstick, and walked through the penthouse one room at a time, noticing what she had trained herself not to see. The framed magazine covers with Andrew at the center. The charity photographs where his hand rested lightly on her back, as if presenting her to the world. The dining table where her red pen had once saved contracts he now signed without reading. Near the elevator, she paused before their wedding portrait. Andrew was smiling at the camera. Naomi was looking at him. That was the difference, she realized. He had always known how to be seen. She had always known how to see. The private elevator opened with a soft chime. Naomi stepped inside, shoulders squared, pearls glowing against her skin, the city waiting below with its chandeliers, cameras, and beautiful lies. She would stand beside Andrew tonight, but not as decoration. not as cover, not as the quiet woman who made his life look honorable while he spent their trust in secret. The doors closed, and her reflection appeared in the polished steel. Calm, elegant, awake. The black sedan waited at the private entrance with its engine humming softly against the cold. Maxwell, the doorman who had greeted Naomi for nearly 7 years, stepped forward with the careful warmth of a man who understood more than he ever said. "You look beautiful tonight, Mrs. Whitmore," he said, holding the door open. Naomi gave him a small smile. "Thank you, Maxwell." The words were simple, but her voice carried a distance that made him pause. He had seen her leave for galas before, laughing into her phone, adjusting Andrew's tie in the lobby, carrying gift bags for charity auctions, and handwritten notes for donors. Tonight, she carried only a clutch, a folded receipt, and the kind of silence that made kindness lower its voice. As the car pulled into traffic, Manhattan unfolded around her in a blur of glass, gold, and winter dusk. Storefronts glowed along Madison Avenue. Couples crossed sidewalks under streetlights. A florist on the corner was wrapping white roses in brown paper, and for one brief second, Naomi remembered the first bouquet Andrew ever bought her, not from a designer florist, but from a street vendor outside a courthouse after she helped him renegotiate a contract that saved his company millions. He had pressed the flowers into her hands and said, "One day, I will give you the world properly." She had believed him because at the time he did not sound like a man making a promise to impress himself. He sounded grateful. The gala was being held at the Whitmore Grand Hotel, a landmark property Andrew had restored after the company recovered. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, velvet ropes, photographers at the entrance, all of it designed to make wealth look like virtue. Naomi watched guests step from town cars in black gowns and tailored tuxedos, their laughter rising in polished waves. Somewhere inside, Andrew would be shaking hands, raising money, smiling for cameras, letting the room believe his life was as spotless as his cufflinks. The driver opened her door. Cold air touched her face. Naomi stepped out, her navy gown moving like still water around her ankles. Camera flashes began at once, bright and eager, and she felt the old training settle over her shoulders. Chin lifted, smile gentle, eyes calm. Never let a room that doubts you see where it has bruised you. "Mrs. Whitmore, this way," someone called. "Naomi, over here. Where is Andrew tonight?" She turned toward the cameras with graceful patience, offering the kind of smile that gave nothing away. Inside the ballroom, the scent of gardenias and expensive perfume floated beneath the music of a live string quartet. Waiters moved through the crowd with silver trays. Donors leaned toward one another in clusters of money and influence. At the far end of the room, beneath a banner for the Whitmore Foundation, Andrew stood in a midnight tuxedo, tall, handsome, and entirely at ease. His silver blonde hair was combed back, his hand resting on the shoulder of a senator, his laugh measured for public approval. He saw Naomi, and his expression warmed automatically, the way a lamp comes on when wired to perform. He crossed the room and kissed her cheek, close enough for photographers, not close enough to feel her stillness. "You made it," he murmured. "Of course," Naomi said. His eyes moved over her face for a fraction of a second, searching for the softness he expected to find. "Everything all right?" he asked. Naomi looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who had once held unpaid invoices in shaking hands and now wore confidence like a family crest. "Everything is becoming clear," she said. Before he could answer, a ripple moved through the ballroom. Sabrina Vaughn had arrived. She entered in a pale champagne gown, smiling as though the room had been built for her reflection. Around her throat rested a delicate diamond necklace Naomi recognized immediately from a credit card statement marked as a corporate gift. Sabrina's eyes found Andrew first, then Naomi. For 1 second, the woman's smile faltered, not from guilt, but from calculation. Naomi felt no urge to walk toward her, no urge to raise her voice, no need to compete with a woman living in an apartment paid for by stolen trust. Instead, Naomi turned her attention to the scholarship table near the center of the room, where framed photographs of young women in business programs lined the display. This was why she had come. Not for Andrew's image, not for the marriage he had already spent carelessly. She had come because somewhere beyond the chandeliers and velvet ropes were girls who needed proof that dignity could walk into any room and not ask permission to stand tall. Andrew leaned closer, his voice low. Naomi, please smile. The board is watching. She looked toward the cameras, then back at him. Her smile appeared, calm and devastating. Then let them watch something honest for once. Andrew's smile did not disappear, but Naomi saw the muscle tighten near his jaw. He had built entire towers on borrowed time and negotiated with men who measured weakness the way bankers measured debt. Yet nothing in his polished life had prepared him for a wife who refused to perform comfort on command. This is not the place, he said softly, still smiling for the board members watching from across the ballroom. Naomi adjusted the pearl earring at her left ear, the one her mother had saved a year to buy, and answered without raising her voice. Strange. You chose public rooms for your reputation and private accounts for your secrets. I am simply standing where both finally meet. For the first time that evening, Andrew looked away. The string quartet shifted into a slower piece, and the chandeliers scattered light over the scholarship display beside them, where photographs of young women in business suits and graduation gowns seemed to watch with quiet expectation. Naomi stepped toward the table, not away from him. She lifted one of the framed photos, a young woman from Newark who had written in her application that she wanted to become a financial advisor because her mother had lost everything in a divorce she did not understand. Naomi remembered reading that essay at 2 in the morning, crying not from sadness, but from recognition. Do you know why I fought so hard for this fund? She asked Andrew. His eyes flicked toward Sabrina, who stood near the champagne wall pretending to admire an arrangement of white orchids while watching them in the reflection of a gold-framed mirror. Naomi, he warned, please. That word, please, arrived too late to be tenderness. It sounded like management. Naomi set the photograph back in its place. Because women are often taught to trust before they are taught to read. They are taught to love before they are taught to protect themselves. They are taught that asking questions means they are insecure, difficult, ungrateful. She turned then, not just to Andrew, but to the small circle that had begun forming around them with the careful curiosity of high society pretending not to listen. I built this scholarship to change that. A reporter from a local business network moved closer, microphone lowered but ready. Andrew noticed and reached lightly for Naomi's elbow, a gesture that looked affectionate to anyone who did not know how control could wear good manners. Naomi looked down at his hand. He removed it. Across the room, Sabrina's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and stepped behind a marble column. Naomi knew before Sabrina did what the call meant. The recurring rent transfer had failed. The hold had taken effect. A few seconds later, Sabrina's perfect expression cracked. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough for Naomi to see the difference between elegance and panic. Andrew's phone buzzed once in his pocket. Then again. He ignored it the first 2 times, but the third vibration cut through his composure. He pulled it out, read the notification, and the color beneath his winter-tan skin changed. Decline transfer. Account under review. Naomi watched the realization move through him like a storm behind glass. What did you do? He whispered. I protected what was ours, she said. His voice dropped lower. You froze the account. I froze the pattern, Naomi replied. The account is simply where the truth left fingerprints. Andrew stared at her as if she had become someone unfamiliar, but Naomi knew she had never been more herself. For years she had been careful with his pride, careful with his family, careful with the rooms where people studied her skin before they remembered her name. She had softened herself so Andrew would not have to defend her too often, so his world would not feel accused by her presence. But standing there beneath the chandeliers, she understood that peace purchased by silence always sent the bill to the person with the deepest heart. That money was mine, Andrew said, so quietly only she could hear. Naomi's eyes did not harden. They steadied. No, Andrew. Wealth may have made you forget the word hour, but marriage did not. The sentence landed between them with the clean weight of a closing door. Around them, conversations resumed too quickly, the way powerful people do when truth becomes inconvenient. Sabrina crossed the ballroom with her phone clutched in one hand, her smile rebuilt but fragile. Andrew stepped toward Naomi, anger hidden behind a public face, but she had already turned back to the scholarship table, where the donation ledger lay open beneath a fountain pen. She signed her name beside a personal pledge from her separate account, enough to fund 4 more students for the year. Her handwriting was smooth, unshaken, almost beautiful. Then she looked at Andrew one last time before the evening broke fully open. "You spent our trust before you spent our money," she said. "Tonight, both accounts are closed." For several seconds, Andrew said nothing. He stood beside the scholarship table with his phone in his hand and the expression of a man watching a door close inside a house he thought he owned. Naomi did not wait for him to find another polished sentence. She turned toward the stage where the foundation director was preparing to announce the evening's honorees, and every step she took felt quieter than revenge and heavier than grief. The ballroom had changed around her. It still glittered with crystal light and champagne flutes, still carried the soft music and careful laughter of people trained to look comfortable in expensive rooms. But beneath the beauty, Naomi could feel the truth moving. It moved through glances, through half-finished whispers, through the way board members stopped smiling when Andrew approached them. Reputation, she had learned, was not destroyed by one secret. It was destroyed by the moment people realized a secret had been financed by arrogance. At the edge of the stage, a young program coordinator named Tiana reached for Naomi's hand with nervous gratitude. Tiana was 22, from the Bronx, the first in her family to attend college, and one of the scholarship recipients Naomi had personally mentored. "Mrs. Whitmore," she whispered, "they want you to say a few words before the pledge announcement." Naomi looked out across the room. Andrew was near the front now, his posture rigid, his smile working too hard. Sabrina had retreated toward the bar, her champagne gown luminous under the lights, but her confidence thinning by the minute. Naomi could have exposed them both in one sentence. She could have turned private betrayal into public spectacle. The room would have devoured it. The cameras would have leaned closer. The donors would have remembered the scandal long after forgetting the girls the night was meant to serve. But Naomi Brooks had never mistaken attention for justice. She stepped onto the stage, and the room softened into silence. The microphone was adjusted to her height. The chandelier light touched her navy gown, the pearls at her ears, the steady calm of her face. For a moment, she saw not the board, not the reporters, not Andrew, but her mother in a hospital uniform years ago, counting cash at the kitchen table and teaching her that dignity was something a woman practiced even when no one applauded. Naomi placed both hands lightly on the podium. "When I was a girl," she began, her voice warm but clear, "my mother taught me that money is not only about luxury. It is about choices. It is about safety. It is about whether a woman can stand upright when life asks her to bow." The room listened more deeply than it expected to. Naomi continued, "That is why this scholarship matters. We are not just writing checks tonight. We are giving young women the education to read what they sign, question what they are told, protect what they earn, and never confuse dependence with love." A quiet shift moved through the crowd. Some women lowered their eyes. Others lifted their chins. Andrew stared at her as though each word had been written with his name behind it, though Naomi never gave the room that satisfaction. "Respect," she said, "is not proven by what a person says in public. It is proven by what they protect in private. And when private trust is broken, the answer should not be shame. The answer should be clarity, courage, and the support to begin again." The applause started slowly, then grew until it filled the ballroom with something stronger than approval. It sounded like recognition. Tiana wiped a tear from her cheek. Several women at the donor table stood. Naomi did not look at Andrew during the applause. She looked at the scholarship recipients, at their young faces bright with possibility, and understood that this was the part of her marriage he had never been able to touch. Her purpose had never belonged to him. When she stepped down from the stage, Andrew was waiting near the side corridor, away from the cameras. His voice was tight. "You made your point." Naomi stopped in front of him, close enough to see the fear behind his anger. "No," she said gently. "I remembered my purpose. There is a difference." His phone buzzed again. Sabrina's name flashed across the screen, urgent and unanswered. Naomi saw it, then looked back at him without bitterness. "You should take that," she said. "Some bills stop feeling romantic when they come due." Then she walked past him toward the women gathered near the scholarship display, leaving Andrew alone beneath the chandeliers, holding a phone full of consequences and a silence he could no longer afford. By the time the gala ended, the first snow of the season had begun to fall over Manhattan, softening the sidewalks, the hotel awning, and the black sedans waiting along the curb. Naomi left through the side entrance instead of the red carpet exit, her coat wrapped around her shoulders, her clutch held firmly in one hand. She did not look back to see whether Andrew followed. She already knew he would. Men like Andrew Whitmore often mistook access for reconciliation, as if stepping into the same car meant stepping back into the same story. The ride to the penthouse was silent except for the faint sound of tires moving through wet streets and the occasional buzz of Andrew's phone. Sabrina called twice. A board member called once. His chief financial officer sent 3 messages. Andrew ignored them all, not because he had chosen Naomi, but because consequences had finally become too loud to manage in public. Naomi watched snow gather along the window edges and thought of her mother driving home after overnight hospital shifts, windshield wipers struggling against winter, a thermos of coffee cooling between shifts she could not afford to miss. Marcia Brooks had never had a joint account with a billionaire. She had never worn diamonds under chandeliers. But she had known something Andrew had forgotten. Trust was not a lifestyle. It was a responsibility. When the elevator opened into the penthouse, the warmth of the apartment greeted them like a beautiful lie. The city lights glimmered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The dining table was still set from the breakfast they had barely shared that morning. White china, folded linen napkins, a silver fruit bowl Andrew's mother had sent years ago with a note that said every proper home needed one. Naomi walked directly to that table and placed her clutch down. Andrew shut the elevator doors behind them, his composure finally cracking into exhaustion. "Do you understand what you did tonight?" he asked. Naomi removed her gloves slowly. "Yes. You embarrassed me in front of donors, reporters, my board." "No," she said, setting the gloves beside the clutch. "I spoke about financial dignity at a financial dignity event. Your embarrassment came from recognizing yourself in the lesson." He loosened his bow tie, pacing once toward the window, then back. "You had no right to freeze anything without talking to me." Naomi opened her clutch and took out the folded receipt. Then another paper. Then another. Printed statements. Transfer records. A lease confirmation tied to Sabrina Vaughn's apartment in Soho. Credit card charges marked as client entertainment on nights Andrew had told Naomi he was in late meetings. She laid them on the table in a clean line, not scattered, not dramatic. Each page placed with the calm precision of a woman who had learned that evidence did not need volume. Andrew stared at the documents, and for the first time that night, he looked less powerful than tired. "Naomi," he said, quieter now. It was complicated. She looked at him with a sadness so controlled it felt almost merciful. "No. A zoning dispute is complicated. A failing development loan is complicated. Taking money from a shared account to pay another woman's rent is not complicated. It is a choice." The words settled into the apartment. Outside, snow blurred the skyline until the city looked like a memory. Andrew pulled out a chair, but did not sit. "I was going to tell you." "When?" she asked. "After the lease ended? After the board retreat? After I smiled through another Christmas card?" He had no answer. Naomi reached into the inner pocket of her coat and removed a final folder, cream-colored, simple, unmistakable. "Rachel, Myers will contact your attorney in the morning," she said. "I am requesting a legal separation, a full review of marital assets, and protection for every dollar connected to the scholarship fund." Andrew's face changed, not with anger this time, but with disbelief, as though he had assumed betrayal could damage her but not move her. "You are leaving me over this?" Naomi breathed once, steady and deep. "No, Andrew. I am leaving because this is not the first time you made me smaller, so your life could feel easier. It is only the first time there was a receipt." He finally sat down, the documents between them like a border neither could cross. "I made a mistake," he said. Naomi's eyes softened, but her voice did not. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A pattern is something you fund monthly." The sentence reached him. She saw it in the way his shoulders lowered, in the way his gaze moved from the receipt to her wedding ring. Naomi touched the ring once, not to remove it yet, but to remind herself that symbols only meant something when the truth beneath them was alive. "I loved you as my husband," she said. "I defended you as my partner. I carried your fear when the world thought you were fearless. But I will face you now as a woman who remembers her worth." Andrew closed his eyes. The penthouse, with all its art and marble and private views, had never felt emptier. Naomi gathered nothing else that night. She had already packed what mattered: the truth, the records, the boundary, and the quiet strength her mother had planted in her long before any billionaire learned her name. By morning, the story had not become a scandal, not exactly. It became something more dangerous to a man like Andrew Whitmore. It became a question. Why had a major transfer from the Whitmore household account been frozen? Why had the foundation's private donors begun asking for independent financial oversight? Why had Naomi Brooks Whitmore, the woman Andrew's world had politely underestimated for years, hired Rachel Myers, one of the most respected marital asset attorneys in New York? Questions moved faster than accusations because powerful people could deny accusations, but questions made them sweat. At 8:15, Andrew walked into the boardroom of Whitmore Holdings with a gray tie, a controlled expression, and the exhausted eyes of a man who had spent the night learning that silence from a wife could be louder than any public disgrace. The conference room overlooked Lower Manhattan, where the city rose in glass and steel beneath a pale winter sun. Around the long walnut table sat people who had once smiled at his confidence and praised his instincts. That morning, they studied him with the cool patience of lenders reading bad numbers. His chief financial officer, Daniel Pierce, cleared his throat and slid a report across the table. Andrew, several personal reimbursements need clarification before the audit committee meets Friday. The word personal sounded polite, but every person in the room understood its edge. Andrew looked at the report and saw what Naomi had already seen: patterns, dates, transfers, expenses labeled too casually, explanations stretched too thin. Nothing illegal enough to collapse an empire overnight, but enough to bruise trust. Enough to make investors wonder whether a man careless with private loyalty could be careful with public money. "This is being handled," Andrew said. His voice came out smooth, practiced, almost believable. Across the table, board chair Margaret Ellis folded her hands. She had silver hair, a navy suit, and the ruthless calm of a woman who had survived 4 market crashes and never once confused charm with governance. "Handled by whom?" she asked. Andrew met her gaze. "By my legal team." "And Mrs. Whitmore?" The room shifted at Naomi's name. For years, the board had treated her as an elegant presence at events, a warm speaker, a useful bridge to philanthropic circles. Now they were beginning to understand she had also been the person who read the fine print when Andrew was too proud to admit he needed help. Andrew's phone buzzed beneath the table. Sabrina again. He silenced it. Margaret noticed. So did everyone else. "Naomi is pursuing a separation," he said, each word clipped and clean. "That is a private matter." Margaret leaned back. "Not when private judgment creates public risk." The sentence landed with corporate finality. For the first time in years, Andrew did not have an answer ready. By noon, a major institutional investor requested a pause on a luxury residential deal in Miami until the internal review was complete. By 2, a philanthropy reporter emailed the foundation asking whether Naomi would continue as chair. By 4, Sabrina left 7 messages, each one less polished than the last. When Andrew finally called her back, she did not ask if he was all right. She asked what would happen to the apartment. He stood alone in his office, looking at a framed magazine cover where his own face stared back beneath the headline "The Man Who Rebuilt Manhattan Luxury." The title suddenly felt like a costume. "I cannot keep paying for it," he said. There was silence on the line. Then Sabrina's voice cooled into something practical and unfamiliar. "Then you should have told me before I built my life around certain expectations." Andrew almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because truth had a cruel way of using other people's mouths. Expectations. That was all he had become to her. Rent, dinners, introductions, a view, a credit card that opened rooms she had not earned. When the call ended, he did not feel betrayed. He felt recognized, and that was worse. He returned to the penthouse after dark. The apartment was still beautiful, but Naomi's absence had changed its architecture. Her books were gone from the coffee table. Her reading glasses were missing from the kitchen island. The small framed photograph of Marcia and Naomi at a Queens community center had disappeared from the hallway console. Nothing valuable was missing, yet everything meaningful had been removed. Andrew walked to the dining table where she had placed the documents the night before. One page remained, not evidence, not a threat, just a photocopy of a handwritten note he had given her years ago after she helped save the company. "I could not have done this without you," He sat down slowly, holding the paper like something rescued from a fire. Outside, snow melted along the windows. Inside, the empire he had built looked enormous, expensive, and suddenly hollow. For the first time, Andrew understood that Naomi had not walked away to punish him. She had walked away because she had finally stopped volunteering to be unseen. 6 months later, the room Naomi chose was nothing like the ballroom where her marriage had begun to end. There were no chandeliers, no velvet ropes, no photographers waiting for a perfect angle. The space sat on the second floor of a renovated brick building in Harlem, above a bakery that filled the stairwell each morning with the warm smell of cinnamon, butter, and fresh bread. The floors were polished but imperfect. The folding chairs did not match. The windows rattled whenever the downtown train passed in the distance. To Naomi, it felt more honest than any marble room she had ever entered as Andrew Whitmore's wife. A simple sign hung near the front, Brooks Financial Dignity Foundation. Beneath it, 27 women sat with notebooks open, listening as Naomi drew 3 circles on a whiteboard labeled income, assets, and access. Some wore business suits. Some wore work uniforms. One had come directly from a hospital shift. Another kept checking her phone because her babysitter could only stay until 7. They were young mothers, divorced women, widows, recent graduates, women who had trusted too much, women who had been told money was too complicated, women who had mistaken secrecy for romance because no one had ever taught them the difference. Naomi stood before them in a cream blouse and tailored black slacks, her natural curls pinned away from her face, her wedding ring no longer on her hand. The absence of it did not make her feel empty. It made her feel clear. A joint account is not the enemy, she said, writing slowly so everyone could follow. Silences. Love does not require financial blindness. Marriage should include trust, but trust should never mean you are not allowed to understand what carries your name. Pens moved across paper. Heads nodded. In the front row sat Marcia Brooks, wearing a lavender cardigan and the proud, watchful expression of a mother who had seen her daughter cry in private and rise in public without turning bitter. Beside her sat Rachel Myers, who had helped Naomi secure the scholarship fund, separate her personal assets, and negotiate a settlement that gave Andrew no access to the work Naomi had built from pain. Rachel had told her once that law could protect a woman's rights, but education could protect her before the damage began. Naomi had carried that sentence like a candle. On the table near the entrance were free folders for every attendee. How to read a bank statement, questions to ask before opening a shared account, the difference between marital property and separate property, when to seek legal advice, how to build emergency savings without shame. Naomi had paid for the first printing herself. Donations came later, quietly at first, then steadily. Women from the gala had written checks. Former students had volunteered. Even one board member from Whitmore Holdings had sent a note that read, "I should have listened sooner." Naomi kept the note in a drawer, not as victory, but as evidence that people could learn when truth was spoken without cruelty. During the break, a woman named Carla approached her, holding the folder against her chest. She was in her late 40s, with tired eyes and the kind of smile that apologized before it appeared. "I thought I was foolish for not knowing these things," Carla said. "My husband always handled the money. I thought asking questions meant I did not trust him." Naomi touched her arm gently. Asking questions does not mean you do not trust someone. It means you are also trusting yourself. Carla looked down, breathing through the sentence as though it had reached a locked place. "I wish somebody had told me that 20 years ago." Naomi's voice softened. "Then we will make sure someone hears it today." When the session ended, the women did not rush out. They stayed in small circles, exchanging numbers, comparing notes, laughing with the cautious relief of people discovering they were not alone. Naomi watched them from the back of the room, her heart aching in a way that no longer felt like damage. It felt like purpose stretching into the space pain had left behind. Marcia came to stand beside her, slipping an arm through hers. "You know what I see?" her mother asked. Naomi smiled. "Please do not say a miracle. You know I still have invoices to pay." Marcia laughed softly. "I see my daughter. Not harder, not colder, just clear." Naomi looked at the whiteboard, at the mismatched chairs, at the women gathering their folders like small shields against an unfair world. For years, she had helped Andrew build tables where only certain people were invited to sit. Now she had built her own, and every woman who entered that room left knowing she deserved a seat, a voice, and a copy of every document with her name on it. 1 year after the night Naomi stopped confusing silence with peace, spring returned to New York with sunlight on the sidewalks and tulips opening in small iron fences along Harlem brownstones. The Brooks Financial Dignity Foundation had moved from the second-floor room above the bakery into a larger community space with tall windows, a small office, and a wall covered in photographs of women holding certificates, business plans, court documents, college acceptance letters, and bank statements. They finally understood. Naomi had not become famous in the way Andrew's world understood fame. She did not chase cameras or sell her pain as entertainment. She became known the quieter way, through women who told other women, through mothers who brought daughters, through churches, shelters, colleges, and neighborhood groups that called her when someone needed help, turning fear into a plan. That afternoon, the foundation hosted its first annual scholarship ceremony. Rows of folding chairs filled the room, and every seat was taken. Marcia sat in the front row with tissues folded in her palm before anyone had even spoken. Rachel Myers stood near the side wall, smiling with the calm pride of a woman who knew that justice sometimes looked like paperwork completed on time. On the small stage, Naomi wore a white dress and the same pearl earrings her mother had given her on her wedding day. She had kept the pearls because not everything from a painful season belonged to the pain. Some things had belonged to love before heartbreak tried to claim them. As Naomi reviewed the names of the recipients, the door opened at the back of the room. Andrew Whitmore stepped in quietly, without cameras, without an assistant, without the easy command he once carried into every room. His hair was a little longer now, his face leaner, his suit still expensive but no longer worn like proof. Naomi saw him from the stage, and the room seemed to narrow for one breath, not from fear, not from longing, but from memory recognizing a person it no longer obeyed. Andrew waited until the ceremony ended. He watched Naomi present the first scholarship to Tiana, who had graduated with honors and was heading to graduate school for nonprofit finance. He watched Carla stand and explain how she had opened her first individual savings account at 47. He watched Marcia wipe her eyes when a 19-year-old student said she wanted to become a financial counselor so her little sisters would never have to sign anything they did not understand. By the time the applause faded, Andrew looked less like a billionaire visiting a charity and more like a man standing outside a life he should have protected. Naomi stepped down from the stage and met him near the window, where afternoon light warmed the floor between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Andrew said, "You built something beautiful." Naomi looked toward the room, where women were laughing, exchanging business cards, hugging their daughters, and gathering folders filled with knowledge that could change the shape of their futures. "I built something necessary," she said. He nodded, accepting the correction. That, more than any apology, told her he had changed enough to listen. "I am sorry," he said. The words were quiet, without performance. "Not because I lost you. Not because people questioned me. I am sorry because I made you carry a loneliness inside a marriage and then acted surprised when you finally put it down." Naomi felt the old ache move through her, but it no longer owned the room. "Thank you for saying that." Andrew looked at her left hand, bare of the ring he had once assumed would hold her in place. "I know I do not deserve to ask for anything." She gave him a gentle smile, not cruel, not hopeful, simply honest. "Then do not." He breathed out, and, for the first time, he did not argue with the boundary. Naomi looked at him with the compassion of a woman who had healed enough not to hate him and learned enough not to return. "I hope you become a better man, Andrew. I truly do. But I no longer have to be the woman who waits for it." His eyes lowered, and when he looked back up, there was grief there, but also respect. He left a donation envelope with Rachel, then walked out without asking Naomi to watch him go. Later, when the room had emptied and the chairs were stacked against the wall, Naomi stood alone by the scholarship photographs. Marcia came beside her, resting a hand on her daughter's back. "Are you all right, baby?" Naomi looked at the young women smiling from the wall, at the folders on the table, at the sunlight settling over the room she had built from truth. "Yes," she said, and she meant it. The joint account was never reopened. The old life remained closed, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. Naomi Brooks had learned that love without respect could become a beautiful room with locked doors, and freedom did not always arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrived as a signed document, a frozen transfer, a mother's pearls, a woman's steady voice, and the first clear morning when she realized she did not need to be chosen by someone else in order to belong fully to herself.